while we get the lag figured out, uh, feel free to ponder the mystery of the internet. Um, I'll be right with you guys. I'll be right with everybody. Stream video bitrate. Cool. Excellent. All right. Uh, I'm glad everyone can make it. Uh, Thanks for waiting out this period, these travails. Um, all right. Uh, Lee, I guess at your signal, I'm going to start. I hope the lag's not too bad. Um, cool. Okay. Thank you for waiting, everyone. Um, so today we're going to be talking about um, something called positioning in CSS. Uh, Positioning is kind of one half of what CSS can do. Feel free to yell at me in chat um, if I'm either moving too fast or too slow. I got this little itinerary, and I think we're gonna like what's happening. So to get y'all started, first, I'm gonna put a link in our chat to a folder of resources on Google Drive that will be useful to you if you want to follow along. Um, if you don't have a code editor downloaded on your computer, something like Sublime Text, Atom, VS Code, brackets, etc., uh, you're going to probably want to download that. Notepad++ is good if you're on Windows. Um, so if you need help finding a link, just post in chat and we'll help you with that. Um, so if you have a code editor and you're ready to go, just give the old okie dokie in chat. Oh, okay, there's still lag, eh? I'm gonna turn down the video quality, I suppose. I'm not sure what else to do about the lag. Uh, Hi everyone. If you're just joining, uh, there's a link here is a link to, okay, we're having some lag issues. All right. Please forgive the lag. Uh, and so I just put, I'm gonna try a different network. All right. Too many people on the internet today. Uh, Hopefully we can address these lag issues. All right. Cool. I hope y'all can hear me. Welcome to another Babycastles Academy. Thank you to Lee for helping organize this. Today we're going to be talking about CSS, which is some people's least favorite way of giving instructions to a computer and other people's favorite way. I like CSS because it's a very literal and parameterized, maybe parametric might be a better word, but parameterized way of doing visual design or the organization of information for human consumption, which is, just another, like, one of the main uses of a website. So if you've never seen what CSS looks like, it kind of has a dual existence as like a permanent thing and as something very dynamic. But let me show you. So this stuff over here on the left, here, wait. Ooh. Come on, please work. Hey, hi everyone. This stuff on the left, or sorry, I guess it's on the right this time. Oh, that's the wrong window in Atom. There we go. Yeah, cool. Boop. Sorry, we're just a little bit of growing pains here. Here we are. Okay. Yeah, cool. So this stuff over here, this is called a CSS parameter. I didn't know, you may not know this, and just shout in the chat if this is too elementary for you guys, but every website is a series of instructions. Often they're divs, and think of it like a series of modular components, right? And at the start of every component is framed by a set of these caret thingies, and there's a beginning and an end, and the end is typically signaled with this backslash here. I'll make this a little bigger. So everything you see on a website is encapsulated in series after series of these dividers, typically. So say I wanted an image, I might put it in here. And the cool thing about these dividers is that because they're text, there's infinite space to add other information at this front of the divider, right? It's kind of like how a train that's pulling a bunch of boxcars will have like a brand and like a railroad that it's associated with, right? Like all that stuff is painted on the train at the front. All that stuff is embedded in the opening part, the opening tag of your element. These are called elements. And just like how a train can have a brand, maybe even a name, right? You might call it your train Susie or Dinah or whatever. Your elements can have names. They can have an identity, right? And that's called an ID. And if you think of like a humpback whale, or not a humpback whale, actually, an orca whale. You know how orca whales all have different patterns on their fins, right? On their dorsal fin, the tail fin. And no two of them are alike. It's the same with the ID for your elements. You want them all to be perfectly unique. So in this case, this div could be named Sally or image right, etc. But typically, you only want to use IDs for something that is a deviation from the norm of a page, right? we're talking about design, that means that we're interested in repetition of form and regularity and order, all those good things that you can read about in design books. So for our purposes, we're going to be working mostly with what's called a class, right? So if the ID is the name of the train that the person driving the train gave it, right? Like its own special name. The class is the company that it works for or the type of train it is. So in this case, it could be button or row. But the thing about the class name is that it's arbitrary, right? It is a label that we are choosing to apply to this element. And that label, right? Let's take a look at the class called row. And you'll notice that in the editor, very helpfully, when you click on the start of a tag, it highlights the end of it, right? So all of these, this whole area has been labeled row. And now getting back to CSS, this represents, or this is pegged to the class row. So any instructions that we put within these two brackets, right? These are sort of the open and close of CSS, whereas with HTML, you use the carets, right? And it's like the difference between like structure over in HTML land and instruction over in CSS land. But so anything we put between these two curly brackets is going to pertain to this class row. So this is what HTML over here on the right and CSS look like in a code editor. I'm going to hop over to the browser real quick, like so. Oops. Hey, everyone. And let me show you the other form that these things exist in. And that is in this thing called the inspector panel. So while I'm doing this overview stuff, if you want to download the content that's available here after the link, click the link in chat, you'll see a Google Drive folder. If you download all that stuff and just keep it in the folder, you'll be working with exactly what I'm working with. So there are two ways, there's a dual nature to HTML and CSS, right? It can look like this when you're editing it in a dedicated editor, or in a browser, it's kind of like the recipe that the web browser, which is a kind of software, spins into making a page. So right now, all of this text that we were looking at earlier, right? All of this correlates to this. But the cool thing about the browser is that it comes with this thing called the inspector panel. A lot of you probably know this already, but if you don't, welcome to a whole new world. If you want to access the inspector panel, I typically on a Mac will hit Command Option I to open it up. Alternatively, I think there's something up in the view. Maybe it's the window tools. Yeah. If you go up to tools in Firefox, you can find it there. Alternatively, in every browser under the sun, you can right-click anything on the page and click Inspect Element. And it'll pop up to a focused view of that element in the inspector panel, which is pretty nice. Okay, so the reason I was talking about the dual nature of CSS is that here's our friendly HTML that we remember earlier, right? We can view it right here in the browser. So here's our body. You'll see that every website has a head, which is where you put um, non-structural instructions. It's sort of like the fanny pack of the HTML, and then the body, where you put all your divs. So, for example, right now we've got our main div, which encapsulates everything, and it's the size of our whole window. And then just to sort of show you how the computer sees this stuff, you know, we've got each div that we've given the class row to looks like this, right? So we've got one row here, and one row here. So it's this whole way of understanding a composition as blocks that stack and intersect and have padding and spacing and gaps. That is an idiom that is derived from metal typesetting. If you think of like a movable type on a plate, um, like the Gutenberg Bible or a poster from say 1870, um, they were working with discrete elements that had to be positioned relative to each other in a very similar way to how HTML elements are positioned relative to each other. Okay, I'm going to check the chat to make sure that everyone's still here. If you're following along, let me know how you're doing. Uh, the program for today is not that ambitious, I promise. Number one, I have make sure everyone has a code editor and is on the same page and has downloaded the example if they want to. So that's what we're finishing up now. Number two, I'm going to show you guys the wrong way to do positioning. And there are several pitfalls that many people encounter. And then I'm going to use your familiarity with those pitfalls as the springboard from which I will introduce you to Flexbox, which is a pretty fail-safe way of getting what you want in terms of positioning. And then lastly, the third part, I'm going to ask you all to vote on which of the two print precedents that are in the drive folder, which of those you'd like to have me recreate in HTML and CSS with you following along, kind of as a demonstration that you can take any arbitrary design, anything you come up with in Sketch or Figma or in Photoshop, or you draw on a napkin or whatever. Just kind of working through the process of taking a layout and translating it into code. But we'll get there when we get there. But first, I'm gonna check in that everything's okay. Let's look at the chat. Great. Oh yeah. Good question. Eek5. So when you upload a website, that's something I can link you to more resources about later. But essentially what you're doing is it's just sitting in a folder on someone else's computer. Maybe it's like GoDaddy's computer or Google's computer or whatever. But you're paying someone for the space that website takes and for the outward-facing name that it has. But yeah, basically it's just an index.html and a CSS file that are linked to each other that are sitting on a computer somewhere. And the browser goes to the URL, which is the name that you've paid to be associated with that file for the outside world, and it loads the instructions based on what's in those two files that you're talking about. There are a million resources on that I can link you to. For right now, I want everyone to just assume that networking on the internet just works magically, and that yeah, cool. So let's get back here. All right. So let me show you all some stuff that you can do in the inspector panel. And I guess while we're at it, I want you all to go to the link that is linked on the with friends, right? Hope you all read this little intro. It's fine if you didn't. If you open up this link that I'm hoping someone will put in the chat, uh, it's a really good reference for Flexbox, which we're going to get to in a second. So I'm going to be referring to this because and just in general, this is a really good resource. That's what's nice about working with coding for the web. There's no shortage of really well-articulated, well-designed resources out there. Okay, so now that we're here in the inspector panel, we basically have the key to the city. Because not only can we inspect, we can also edit. And that's where it starts to get fun. The edits that you make in the inspector panel are not permanent unless you consciously save them. So keep that in mind. Don't refresh the page when you're doing this. So let's do some stuff. Feel free to follow along if you want, and once you get the gist, start playing around. So we've got our 3 row elements, right? Let me show you how you apply a CSS parameter. There's a good one called background color, right? And if you're paying close attention, you see that as I start typing, the inspector, the developer panel, whatever you want to call it, it knows every single CSS parameter that is available. And it knows what all of the legal values and options for each one are. So it's really helpful because you can just hit the arrow key and flip through them. In this case, we want background color. And it comes preloaded with a bunch of colors. You can also put in a hex code or an RGB color code. So if you're curious about how to represent color to a computer, there are lots of ways to do it. And that's the kind of thing that would be best addressed by clicking on this link from the With Friends, right? W3 Schools. This is a very nice site. If you click on Learn CSS, or essentially if you Google search any selector, right, any parameter like background color that you see in the inspector panel, there'll be a W3 Schools article that's very helpful with that goes into detail about the legal options you can give it. All right, so that's how you apply a parameter. You can also edit the whole CSS all at once like this. If you click on the little style editor thing up here, I guess my mouse is hidden, so I'm sorry about that. But I'm going to go back to inspector. All right, so one of the tricks I want to show you all is making things bright, stupid colors while you're working on it to clarify the whole situation. So, like for right now, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to click right after the word column, right? If you just click on the sort of the white space around so like you can't click up here, but you can click down here to add a new one, right? I'm gonna add another background color. Oops, background color of red in this case, and notice you cannot see it. Why is that? It's all over the place, right? This whole thing is the div main. Why can't we see its red background? It's because the rows are covering it. So if we want the rows to not cover it, let's add some space between the rows, some margins, right? That's another term that's derived from print. Let's do margin, and I'm going to use a little thing called VH. So what does 10 VH mean? That means it is 10% of the height of the window. And if the window changes height, the value of 10 VH also changes. It is the sibling unit to VW, which is the width of the window, right? So 1 VW, in this case, is not as wide as 1 VH. And if I were to change this width, you'd see that VH doesn't change when I do that, but it does change when I do this. It gets narrower, right? You can also specify things like directions. Like if I just want it to be on the top, see, now they just have a margin on their top. You can go forever messing around with that. All right. So let me show you guys the wrong way to do some positioning. I'm going to open up one of these rows. Right now, these all are the class button, and they all link to google.com. An A tag is like a div or an image. The A is short for anchor, and it has a attribute, right? The text inside that intro tag, that's called an attribute. It's the typical format is attribute equals and then what's called a string. You don't have to remember this terminology, it's fine. But just like something between quotes. And typically it's a web address or a file on your computer. Usually you can just copy and paste this stuff from W3 schools. So what I wanted, let's say I want the word apple to be up in the upper left-hand corner of this. Well, I know for a fact, right? So I'm going to go in here and let's find apple. Here it is, right? Yes, it's in this div with the class button. All right. If I right-click on this where it says div class button and hit edit as HTML, I'm going to add a name for this, right? I'm going to give it its own name, call it Apple. And now, if I go up over here to where it says element, oops. So I'm going to find Apple. Yep. And you see this plus sign that says add. If you hover over it, it'll say add new rule. Yeah, I'm going to click on that with Apple selected, and now I have a new rule that applies only to Apple. Well, great. I just learned about margins, so I want Apple to be off to the left. I'm going to give it a margin on the left. That seems pretty good, right? Well, let's see how it goes. I'm going to pick margin right, and I know all about these relative units now. So yeah, remember everyone, this is not the right way to do it. Yeah, let's say 20 VH. Oh look, it's moved over there now. That's pretty good. 40 VH. Oh yeah, it's getting all the way over there. Pretty good. Not bad at all. But that's where you're wrong. So let's see if I wanted to move it up to the upper left. I'll give it a margin top of a negative. Why not? That's right. If you give it a negative margin on the top, it'll move up. And let's give it 15 VW. Oh, look, it's up there now. It's pretty good. Not bad. But, unfortunately, we have just made a grave mistake. Because if the window changes size, Apple is going to fly right off the top. And that is not what we want. Similarly, the way that we defined that margin right on our Apple, it's pushing orange and pear all the way over here to the right. And as a general rule with CSS parameters, if what it takes to define one position has an effect on another element, right? Like they shouldn't have to interfere with each other. So maybe doing it with margins like this isn't so good. Um, so and that's correct. You should only really use margins for stuff like putting spaces between your divs or bumping a piece of text from being against the left side of the screen, bumping it in a little bit so it looks less compressed. So I'm going to get rid of these. Yeah, we don't need those. Boop, boop, get out of here. All right. What's another way to move Apple around? Well, I could just say, let's have it, uh, give it the CSS parameter right. Now we're doing something called absolute positioning. If I say right 20 VW, nothing happens yet. Why is that? Oh, it's not a positioned element. All right, so let's try giving it a position parameter. And let's have it be absolute. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Whereas before, it was pushing against orange and pear, right, and spreading them out with a margin between the two. Now, it's all the way off to the right. Why is that? That's because when something is positioned with absolute positioning, it is looking at the entire page, and its positioning is based on how it relates to the entire page. So, for example, if I said right 0, it is going to be all the way on the far right edge of the page. And similarly, if I said top 0, now it's all the way at the 0 pixel mark, right at the origin. So when you do want to use this, is say you want something to always cover the whole page and be as wide as the page, you might want to put it at pixel 0, 0, left 0, top 0. But as a general rule, this stuff gets pretty messy because let's go to, say, a normal website. Do you think that the person who put together this website defined the position of every element with an exact absolute position? You know, so like, for example, oh yeah, like this box, we're going to put this at 500, 500, and this box we're going to put at 900. Like, no, it gets insane. And it's not that doesn't utilize the block stacking nature of HTML, right? That's one of the features, is that you can edit it en masse. You can edit things as a unit, as a big group. So, and you want to utilize that, right? You want to be able to say, all of my rows turn from blue to green. You know, you don't want to have to, or all of my rows shrink from being 100 VH to 10 VH or 33. Or even maybe you have a piece of JavaScript or something that is saying to your rows, I want you to be 10 units tall 1 second and then 15 units tall the next. You know, we humans here at the keyboard aren't the only people aren't the only entities, the only people giving instructions or defining CSS parameters, right? On the modern internet, all kinds of stuff. We've got instructions writing instructions, basically. So you want things to be pretty non-discrete as much as possible, right? Pretty generalized, systematized. And in that case, You kind of want to avoid absolute positioning unless you really need to, because it's too slow. It's too finicky. I'm not going to go and like sure if you're doing a cool art project, right? And you want to make sure that something is in the middle of the screen. All right, you could definitely say I want this to be at 50 VH or sorry, 50 VW, right? And I want it to be at 50 VH absolute positioning, and I want it to have a font size of 10 VW. Uh-oh, look at that though. Notice the right edge of our word apple is at the 50% line on the screen, right? It's right down the middle. But the center of the word isn't. And there might be some silly CSS thing you can do to center it, like with like bounding box or something, or box sizing. Uh, but you don't want to have to screw around with that. That's reinventing the wheel. So what's the best way to make something centered in the middle of the page so it's always centered? Good question. Well, it's not with margins, and it's not with absolute positioning. So we're going to get there. Um, a lot of people, when they start coding, when they start making websites, they hear about something called the margin auto zero trick. Uh, and it's a shorthand that exists in CSS that um, when the stars align and the parameters on all of the surrounding elements are favorable, you can do something where you set the margin property to 0 auto, and sometimes it'll center the things the way you want to. Um, if you very specifically need to have like a very simple website, you can use the margin auto zero trick. I don't, but a lot of people lean on it like a crutch, which is fine if you need that. But I'm here to teach you a little bit more than that. So keep the margin auto zero trick in mind, but we're gonna move past that. Uh, all right. So this is our beautiful website. I hope everyone's aesthetic sensibilities are really just titillated by this. Uh, and all right. I hope everyone's having fun following along. I'm gonna check out the chat really quickly. Would you mind making full screen the browser hard to read? Okay, sure. Sorry. Now's where it counts. Uh, is that a little better? I hope so. Um, cool. All right. So we're about 40 minutes in. Everyone has the inspector panel open. We're under the hood of the car. We're we're screwing around. We're loosening things, tightening things. You can really go wild. You can add stuff if you want and see where everything is. Pretty good. Uh, but our mission today is a little bit different. Um, so let me talk about Flexbox for a second here. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to refresh the page, and it's back to its original state. Um, okay. Is the font size okay now? Is that a little better? I can do something in the browser settings, I think, to increase it. Uh, let's try 12. see if that works. Excellent. Good to know. All right. Cool. So I'm going to start to induct you all into the mysteries of Flexbox. You can see that our divs, our buddies here, have this little tag that says flex off to the right. I really wish that OBS wasn't hiding my mouse button. If anyone knows how to have it show the mouse, that'd be great. But I'll make do for now. Anyway, so there's this thing called the display property in CSS, which sounds kind of metaphysical, right? It's like, but for example, you can set it to display none, and that's a way to break the element out of the box model of the page. You can also set it to display, oops, sorry. You can set it to display block. And what that'll do is they act like a stack of blocks, literally. You can set it to display inline. And in this case, it works very similar to block. Don't worry about inline for right now. Just know that the default, if you do not define a display setting, is block. And it works just like a Microsoft Word document if you have it in block, right? Or a Google Doc. Like, things are going to take up space on the page and then bump things down to the next line if there's an intersection, okay? With Flex, it's a little different. Because we've defined this max height parameter on our main div, Flexbox is our flex parameter is, okay, let me start over. So if this max height were set to 10% of the screen, it would fit, oh here, wait, let me nudge this down just a tiny little bit. 1 sec. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so if the maximum height of our div, right, we're just changing these parameters around, it's like a menu. If it were set to 15%, a display of flex would have its contents all fit within main. Let me add some color to illustrate this, right? So I'm going to give this a background color of RGB 15, 15, 180. Oh, that's a pretty ugly color. 15, 150, 180. Okay, that's not so bad. That's how you define colors in RGB, if you didn't know. The first one is the amount of red, the second one is the amount of green, and the third one is the amount of blue. And they all go from 0 to 255. You can also add a fourth parameter, which is the amount of transparency. It's on W3 Schools. It's very handy if you want to look it up. So if with this set as flex, notice how the 3 rows, right, our 3 buddies here, they all fit inside of our main div. If I turn off flex, they jump down and are filling up the whole page. Right now, the rows are set to have their own height parameter. Notice it's not a maximum height, it's an absolute height. Their own height of 100% of the height of the page. 100 VH means the whole height of your browser window. So when I turn off flex for their parent div, right, the parent is the element that contains the children, right? So our 3 rows are the children, and main is the parent. And when I turn off flex for the parent, the children are no longer constrained by the size of the parent. And this is one of our first interactions of multiple CSS parameters. And ideally, you want all of your interactions to be favorable, right? So what it means is that this height parameter on our rows, if this were something that you were going to publish, put on the web, and you still wanted this one to have a flex parameter, we wouldn't need this height parameter because it's not doing anything right now, except for stretching this top div to its limit, right? So I'm going to have some fun and set this to 420 pixels, all right? Actually, no, that's too small. Let's do 840 pixels. Oh, see, that's the maximum height, 420 pixels. Okay. There's nothing stretching it to its maximum height right now, so it's going to be as small as it can. If its children want to be 100% of the window tall, but the parent has a maximum height of 420 pixels, they will stretch it to exactly 420 pixels. If you would like to learn more about this kind of stuff, because I shouldn't belabor this too long, box model HTML is the Google search for you. Yeah, the CSS box model. And may I also recommend looking at something called the metal typesetting galley. I think I spelled galley wrong. Yeah, hot metal typesetting. Sure. This is one of my favorite topics. As actually more like letterpress typesetting. Yeah, cool. So if you ever want to have a good think about the box model, spend some time looking at letterpress printing and then reading this W3 Schools page, and you'll have a good old time. But for right now, that's all we need to know, is that the parents and the children have like a hierarchy of instruction, like so. All right. So yeah, let's make a 3x3 grid. Our main div is going to have a max height of 100 VH, that is 100% of the height of the window. Our rows are going to want to be 100% VH, but they're not allowed to right now. All right. So there's this parameter, flex direction. And if you've been looking through here, you can see that flex direction is one of the many specific parameters that are specific to the Flexbox system. If I were to change this to column reverse, notice that dog, cat, rabbit jumps up top, while if I have it normal style, apple, orange, pear jumps up top. You can also have it set to something like row. And with row, let's set our row elements to have a background color of bisque and a margin of 5 pixels, just so you can see how they're interacting with their parent. All right. Yeah, so if we set it to row, they're going left to right across the main Flexbox. If we set it to column, they'll go up and down. Pretty nice. Notice that each row element also has its own display flex parameter, right? So we've got flex boxes inside of flex boxes. And for each one of these, we're using some more of the parameters here. In this case, justify content, and I think another one too. But yeah, the justify content option is pretty nice. It can be center, which means that all of the children of our row, visible here, right, our 3 buttons, all of them are in the center. And, or it can be end. They're all at the end of the box. Start. A bunch of special cases that you don't need. But these are the 3 fun ones. So space around will calculate a position for the children that creates a uniform space, a uniform negative space around each one. Space between focuses on creating the most possible space between each one and keeping that uniform. And space evenly prioritizes. Well, let me just show you. If you put it to space around, you see how the shape, if you were to outline our 9 words, it's sort of more rectangular, or like, in this case they're pretty similar, but if I were to stretch out the window, you'd see better that space evenly is always going to make a square, whereas space around in this case is actually making a rectangle. So it's just a subtle difference. So I'm going to set it to space around for right now. And then just for fun, because all of these are also divs, right? Right now, all of the class button doesn't have any CSS rules associated with it. But we can change that. So I'm going to add a rule for button and start by saying, let's give it a background color of, let's pick something nice. Coral, that's a nice one. And let's have it have a minimum width of 7.5% of the screen width, and a minimum height of 7.5 of the screen height. And notice that if I go back to row, this is going to change how this parameter works, right? So suddenly it's moving the whole div, right? But I'm going to go back to button because I like button. And because these are also flex boxes of their own, we can say stuff like justify content. Let's do center for now. And notice it's not doing anything. Why is that? It's because, oops, we didn't set these to be display flex. Now they're flex containers. And you can see with the word cat that if we turn this on and off, it's the difference between it being left aligned, as text is by default on the web, versus centered. But what if we want it to be centered top bottom as well? That, I believe, is align content center. Is that right? No, it's not. Well, the first thing we should do then is flex direction column, and then so now it's working this way, and this is where I check the tutorial. Yes, justify content. This is why it's fun. Also, it's sorted very nicely. So these are the properties for the parent on the left, and these are the properties for the children. I'm mostly talking about parent properties today, but the children properties are pretty handy as well, specifically order. Here we go. Align items. Yeah, so not align content, but align items center. All right, so now all of these words are perfectly centered in their boxes. Um, so now, to rewind back to that margin auto 0 example, if you wanted to have an item perfectly centered in the page all the time, I'm just going to hide this for now. Oops, not none. I'm going to set this to display none for the moment, just to get rid of it. Display none. And I'm going to add a new div right up here. I'm going to do this nice and fast. Div class equals test. You don't have to follow along for this if you don't want to, but close it up there. And in it, there's going to be another div with a class of test child, which sounds kind of spooky. Close that up. All right. So, and then in test child, there's going to be the word in a span. Oh no, let's put it in a paragraph because you should know about paragraphs if you don't. This is a paragraph tag. It's a P, right? And then you can put text in it. So like, this is text. All right. And you can see that it has appeared over here. So I'm going to go grab our test div, give it a display flex, give it a width of 100 VH, and a height of 100 VH, and a flex direction of row, and an align content of center, and a justify content of center, and I'm going to leave it there for now and go into here and click our test child, give it a background color of blue. So you can see that right now our test child is the whole width of the page, and our test parent is also this zany size, right? But it is centered there. So let's go in here and give our child a max height of 10 VH, and go back up here, and let's remember what's going on here. So flex direction column, justify content space around align item center. Okay, so in that case we want justify content space around and align items to center. It doesn't like that. Invalid property name. Align items center. So that seems harder, but it works every time. So the justify content deals with left to right in Flexbox land, and align items deals with top to bottom. That's when we're working with it having a flex direction of row. If flex direction is column, it's the opposite. Align items deals with it on this axis, and justify content deals with it on this axis. If I have that wrong, forgive me. But that's how you center something in Flexbox land. And Um, the general philosophy of divs is that you want to um, you use them like the golden ratio meme, right? The golden ratio, right? Like this. If you want something to be at the inner point of the curl, you want to make a series of boxes that bring it into that curl, right? Rather than trying to put in a decimal number that defines the center point of the curl. Instead, you just make a div and then another div and then another div and another div. And you sort of work your way down. All right. So that's why Flexbox is great, because it lets you do this golden ratio thing. Lee, thank you so much for the help in the chat. I've been kind of uh, I've just been I've been chugging along. Okay, so I hope this is working for everyone. I'm trying to like I have no idea how much experience people have with this stuff. Um, but yeah, the golden ratio really helpful in thinking about Flexbox relationships. So I'd like everyone to take a look at the folder. Here, I'm going to switch over to Adam for a second. Um, and we've got these two print precedents, right? There's this one and this one. Could you vote in the chat uh, which one you'd rather see me recreate using Flexbox in the browser? The one with the three different size text boxes on top of an image, uh, or the one that has a three-column layout of text on the left and then a 3x3 grid of images with captions underneath and rounded borders. So I guess this one will be 1 and this one will be 2. Let's see what people think. It's a little bit hard. Image with captions seems cool. Image grid captions. Cool. All right. Nice. We're closer to that one anyway. Um, so I'm gonna do uh, I'm gonna do this all in the inspector panel for right now. Um, all right. So I grabbed these from an old book of designs made by Pentagram Design Studio. So let's go to OBS and tackle this challenge in the next 20 minutes. Okay, great. So I'm going to right click over here and just get rid of this test scenario. So we don't need it anymore. And if I go back into the CSS from main, I'm going to let it be displayed again. Right, so I'm going to turn off display none. And we're back. Another nice thing you can do in the inspector panel while we're here is you can define the size very precisely, right? So because we're making a composition that is um, landscape format, but I also need to fit it into the stream, et cetera, et cetera. Oops. I'm gonna do it like this. And yeah, so that, I'll do it like that for now. responsive design is another topic, but that's one of the reasons to use Flexbox, is because um, not having specific numbers that relate to like measurements, defining where things show up on the page, really helps the page continue to work no matter what the size of the screen is, right? So you can see um, up here that I can go crazy changing the size of the screen, but because these relationships between the items are um, in Flexbox language, uh, they they stay constant. They still work. All right. So the first thing to do is we've got our main div with our 3 rows. I'm going to change the class of main to Okay, sorry for the delay. I'm on my built-in mic now because my headphones died. So yeah, the first thing that we're going to do to start is we're going to switch this to having the class right, and I'm going to go in and add another div with the class left. And again, these names are just labels that I'm giving them to keep it straight in my own head. All right. So now we have left and right. And if I go over to our style editor, I'm going to go in and change main to right. And copy right and make left the same right now. And then let's add a background color of yellow for left and background color of green for right. And notice right now left is being completely squished off the page by right. So let's head back here and make yet another div, a new parent for our left and right, which are themselves parents. And now this one is going to be called main. All right, so we're adding another layer of divs here. Okay. And now our main div is going to become a flex div, like so. Sorry, display flex. And our left div should have some stuff in it. So let's, because unless the CSS says otherwise, divs with no content take up no space on the page. So let's put a paragraph in there for now. Test. Alright, cool. So we've got our 2 divs. We're making good progress. Let's take a look at our image again. Looks like they're divided about 50-50 on the page. And that we can do pretty simply, actually, by giving this one a width of 50 VW, and let's give right a width of 50 VW as well. 50, oops, nope, width 50 VW. Alright, so now we've really made great strides. And the cool thing about this is 50 VW is half of the page no matter what size the page is. So our design is not going to break unless the screen is really ludicrously small. And let's see. So let's see how people are doing over here. Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah. So now we're gonna keep golden ruling our way down in left, right? So instead of there being a div here, or a paragraph here, I'm gonna put in two divs. One, I'm gonna give it the class left top, close it up, and another one, I'm gonna give the class of left bottom, close it up. And a note on class naming conventions. This might be a little over specific for some developers. They might like stuff like header or footer, because you want it to actually be more generic, because like what if you wanted to use these parameters in a position where they weren't on the left, right, of the page? But for the purposes of teaching, having everything be left, right, top, bottom is a pretty good way to handle it. So yeah, we've got left top and left bottom, and just to save myself some time, I'm going to put, because I know I'll need them later, I'm going to put 3 divs with the class text column, in case I need that. I'm going to put 3 of them in left bottom, like so, and this is where copy and paste are your friend. Alright, and in fact, I'm going to put some text in each of these text columns. Test, test, test. Okay, and I'm going to put some stuff in left top as well. Like this, a paragraph, maybe. A p tag, as they call it. Text. Alright. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Okay, so if we want to divide the space up between these things, let's make it so that left bottom has some rules associated with it. For example, well, this is a good place to check the reference here. And I think in this case, actually, we want it to align itself to the end of the box. This is where it starts to get kind of subjective, but let's try, align, self, flex, end. Okay, cool. So notice our left bottom divs jumped over to the right because the flex direction on our left div is still set to row. So you all know what we need to do next. Oh, it's set to column. Oops, we need to set it to row. There we go. So this is a space where, actually no, we do want to set it to column. Yeah, see? Our top div is taking up 328 pixels, and this one is taking up this much space. So one thing we got to do with left bottom is give it we want this thing to take up all the space it can. right? So we want it to have a width of 100 VW. No, we want it to have a width of 100%. Does that do it? Yes, good. So that's a situation where you're going to want to use percents rather than window units like VW and VH. Percents are all relative to the parent element, whereas VW and VH, if you remember, are relative to the size of the window. So yeah, these are flex ending now. So we want this top one to give it a justified content center, which doesn't do anything because it's not a flex container. Let's make it display flex. Alright, that's starting to look pretty good. Let's make left bottom a flex container. Alright, and give it a flex direction of row, and let's give text column a width of 100%. No, not 1%. 100%. Really good. Let's make these. Let's give these a text align. Actually, no. Let's give these a background color of red and a margin of 10 pixels. All right. And now I'm gonna go over to here and copy all this text, and let's pop that into our columns here. Boop. 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 And in fact, I'm going to undo that and put them all in paragraph tags, like a good web developer. Paragraphs. Copy that through, like so, and I'll copy this stuff again. Put it in there so we can have columns of text. Alright. Okay. Ooh, this is happening because the site is currently only rendering at 672 by 400 pixels wide. So what we're going to do to amend that is let's add a new rule to the whole website that says font size is going to be 1 VW. Alright. And then our left top is going to have a font size of 5 VW. Alright. Okay, let's see how we're doing. So if we go back over to Atom, we're getting there. We've got our 3 columns. The padding, the margin on ours is a little too wide. And where they say ship shapes, they have a special font applied, which is not hard. Let's make left a little bigger, right? Actually, over here, yeah. These guys down here in left bottom, they should have a smaller margin, and they should have a margin of, it should only be on the, so if you want to define, oh sorry, one sec, my bad, and we're back, cool. If you want to define a margin on just a couple sides of an object, you would say something like margin, and this can take up to 4 parameters. which are the first one is top, and then it's like a clock: top, right, bottom, left. So in this case, it would be 0, 10, 0, 10 would be left and right. But we don't want them to be that big. So let's do 0, 1, and 1. Just tiny little margins. Just like we see over here on our thingy. Though I guess we probably want left bottom itself to have a little thing called padding, which is like a margin, except it only works from the margins push out, padding pushes in. So it's going to be padding of padding 0, 5 pixels. 0, okay, yeah, see, and padding doesn't interact that well with Flexbox, so I'm actually not going to do that. It would look more normal if everything didn't have color around it. So the next step, of course, is to get the right sides sorted out. So let's go over here to right. We've got our rows, and in them we have our buttons, right? So we're actually pretty close to being all the way there. If we set the justify content on row to space evenly, and we set our buttons to want to be, oops, oh no, oh no, I left the page, it's all gone, folks. Alright, we were pretty close. All I was gonna do is set them to have a width parameter of 100% so that they would fill in the space and look like these, right? And there's something called W3 schools, border, radius, CSS. The border radius property that you can use to add rounded corners to your divs, which is pretty sweet. You can have a lot of fun with border radius. If you set it to something like 15 VW, right, 15% of the width of the page, you're going to get a perfectly rounded border, which is pretty sweet. And it interacts in a fun way with padding, too. Right? So if you want a perfect circle, you could do something like this. Oops. Pretty fun, right? So yeah, sorry that I lost everything there. That's the peril of working in the inspector panel. It's fun for testing things out and debugging and diagnosing why your code might not be working, but if you accidentally refresh the page or hit delete to make your browser go back, you will lose everything. So I hope everyone had fun and learned a lot. So yeah, to summarize, flex style positioning requires a little bit more setup time, right? Because you have to deal with things like align items and justify content and flex direction, etc., etc. But once you get the hang of those, there is no positioning outcome that cannot be reached by golden ratioing your way down to a specific location. And the benefit is that Flexbox never breaks. I know it sounds like I have blind faith in this thing, but with Flexbox works really well between mobile and desktop and at different sizes. Because I would be remiss not to. There's a thing called a media query that, if you're really into this stuff, you should take a peek at. This is a media query. And just like everything else in CSS, it's between these two curly brackets. And a media query is essentially an if-then statement, right? It is a condition. In this case, if the screen is at maximum 800 pixels, which is to say, if the width of the screen is less than 800 pixels, then the CSS rules inside of this media query, right, between these two curly brackets, will take effect if and only if the maximum width of the screen is 800. I could set it at 1,000 or 5,000, whatever I want, and I can also do min width. And there are actually plenty of different things you can do with media queries. So, like, for example, if I were to go to CSS tricks, media queries, there's a whole amazing resource here for very specific strategies for getting what you want out of media queries. So media queries interact really well with Flexbox because you can, like, typically on a phone you'll want to have things shift from being a wide style grid, like the layout we were looking at in here, right? You're going to want to shift from that to them being like a list. And typically what you'll do is have a media query that shifts the display property on your main element, right, display, to block. Or alternatively, it can stay flex, but you might change the flex direction from column to row or vice versa. That was a lot to cover at once. We might do another one of these someday. I wonder if you have any questions. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Thanks for sticking around, everyone. There are plenty of days where you'll learn, about a specific CSS rule or all that stuff. That stuff's pretty easy to learn. It took me way too long to realize that to learn not to do the bad positioning habits and to trust Flexbox. So once again, this complete guide to Flexbox, bookmark it. And heck, you can even buy a poster of it. Pretty nice. Find me on Twitter at VibeFeelMood if you have any questions. I've got to go buy some projectors and wish my brother a happy birthday. But thanks for checking this out. Hope you had fun. Hope you learned some stuff. If you're able to, please consider subscribing to Babycastles on Twitch or with friends. And check us out on Instagram and Twitter. We're New York's most singular and best and coolest indie arcade and video games collective that exceeds any definition. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, folks, and I will see you soon. Stay safe, everybody.